both men and women, but I work particularly with a lot of women executives in a variety of industries to make them more compelling communicators anytime they're speaking in a live situation or face-to-face, much like we are right now.
Great. Thank you, Lauren. Yanin, you are next.
Okay, hi everyone. Nice to see you all today. I'm Yanin San Luis. You can call me Yoni, and I am the owner of the Win Woman. And what we do is that we help sales and we help women and organizations help them in sales and negotiation. So I work with a lot of nonprofit and corporations to help really just close the gap on these pieces. And then when I'm not doing that, I'm also a faculty member and professor at Florida International University here in Miami, Florida, in the United States.
Great. So I was like starting with like talking about the actual situation. So the actual COVID crisis put a lot of women in this position to reinvent themselves and make their side hustle their main job. So what's your story and why did you decide to start your own business and when? Let's start with you, Yanin.
Sure. I'm happy to do that. So, for me, I was very much a corporate climber for a long time and enjoyed the corporate life. I really enjoyed, the six-figure job with benefits and, the colleagues that you have around you in the support team. But I do think that when you have the entrepreneurial spirit, sometimes it's okay to want more. And that's what I wanted. I wanted more and I wanted for change to happen more quickly. And so I decided to really start on my own on consulting. I had been consulting for the last 7 years with nonprofit organizations and corporations and sales. And I decided that was my side hustle for a while. And then all of a sudden in the pandemic, especially, there was a lot of organizations that really needed a lot of support and ramping up. And so I took the full plunge and decided to make my side hustle full-time hustle. So we ended up ramping up, my team and I, over the last year and a half to a full service boutique firm to incorporate it. But for me, it all started with wanting more and knowing how to get started.
Yeah. How was for you, Lauren?
I started out as the world's worst librarian. I was a librarian in a former life, and while I still adore libraries, I didn't much particularly like working in them. And what I did mostly, the area that I got the most joy out of that work was when I was giving presentations, when I was up in front of a crowd speaking. Always loved speaking. And as I would go through and give my boring presentations about boring databases and get people to be not bored about them, I started getting heads of libraries and heads of committees and heads of associations coming to me and saying, that was great. Never thought databases could be interesting. Could you come back to our next conference, or could you come to our organization or our library and teach my staff how to speak like you? And I thought, there's probably something there. And as I went on, I did that as a side hustle for quite a while. And then in another position, I would sit on a lot of committees, not usually as the top person on the committee, but with many stakeholders who were heads of other organizations. And then one day, my supervisor, out of the blue, said, people talk to you. I don't know why. Could you help me learn how to get people to talk to me? I thought, yes, I can. I absolutely can. So that is actually how my business got started. It was with people directly asking me to help them become better communicators. And it grew slowly over a number of years until I finally took it full time. And this is now my life. I work with a lot of different organizations, any kind of presentation, any kind of communication issue you could possibly imagine, everything from difficult interpersonal communication to fighting in between departments to pitches and presentations and entering in negotiations. If it involves talking with your mouth, I come in and help them.
Amazing. Yeah, it's something that actually is quite useful to everyone. any job you doing, if you're working events, Ellie, that is quite common as a kind of desirable quality to have. But even if you work in a creative industry or in the tech industry, if you work in sales or in marketing, you need that quality and you need that knowledge anyway. So, but it's also true that so many women, I think it's something that I touched in a previous conversation with Yanin last week during the Instagram live. They spending their years climbing and for their way up to the corporate ladder, dealing with corporate politics and working long hours without feeling the over fulfillment they crave. What do you think about this? It is something that resonate with you in a way that, for example, it was a choice after like dealing with this kind of environment that puts you in the position to think, actually, this is not my place anymore. I probably want to do something different. It's something that happened to you, Lauren, before you jump and you actually create your own business.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, very, very much so. It's it's funny, at the start of my working life, I was really keen, much like Yanin said, to climb the corporate ladder. In this case, to visions of myself being the head of some giant academic library. That was very much there. But as you go through your jobs, that's maintaining an attitude of curiosity and flexibility over the individual, the different kind of tasks, the different kind of things you get up to that really spark your fire, where you find you can really shine, usually with a lot of soft skills, and saying, hey, there's something there, I think is an important quality, because then you're not stuck on someone else's ladder. You can start to create your own. You can say, I don't need to play that game to create the life that I want. There's something here. And maybe you stick with that game for a while, but you still say, okay, what can I do with over here, and see where it goes.
What do you think about that, Yanin? And I remember there was this conversation last week about it.
Absolutely. And I completely agree with what Lauren's sharing. And I would even go a step further, that for those of you who are in the contemplative state of, I want to go into full-time in my business, what has happened during the last year with the shutdowns that have happened and the pandemic, and the increased number of hours working from home for a number of individuals, is that whatever problems and challenges there were inside of the corporate place and the workplace, whatever hostility or any of things, have been greatly amplified. And so it's one of those things, is what I have been seeing from the women that I've spoken to, and even overall. And I think that this is, it's hard to say, because a lot of people are like, is COVID a blessing? Am I grateful for COVID? Things like that. I've heard, back and forth where people lie. And I will say, what it has allowed for a lot of people to do is take a step back and pause and really reflect, is this something that I really want to do at this time? But also continually see, where do I see myself in the next year, in the next 2 years? How long will I last? And so that reflection period is where I think people should be able to take a little bit of a step back and marinate it in a little bit more. And this is where you can, instead of being on the hamster wheel that we were very much on for a long time, where it was like, wake up, breakfast, work, activity, social, come back, whatever it was, it's really caused us to pause and be able to reflect, is this what I want? And that's a question that continues to permeate in so many people's minds at this time.
Yeah. Well, what do you think about this, Ali? Because obviously for you is a different kind of situation. You work for an amazing company, which is Bulgari. So your point of view is completely different. So I'm curious to understand what you think about it.
Yeah, of course. I think for me personally, like even when I was actually at university, I set up like a small business then, and I was always someone who very much wanted to have my own business. And I was a freelance wedding planner for a while, but I always had something on the side. And then I thought, actually, you know what? I loved kind of working in these venues, and I love looking at these hotels and thinking, oh, I love planning all these weddings, but I'd actually love to try it out the other side. So I kind of went in it, and I've kind of really jumped around and gone from obviously working my way up to head of events, which is fantastic, but also to doing my freelance kind of work on the side as well. And I think it's just been really, I think definitely over this past year, for example, I think it's given a lot of people, like Yoni said, to really reflect on what they really want from their lives and from their kind of career progression. And rather than thinking of it as like a linear progression, it's more of like a jungle where you're moving around, you're doing different things, you're not necessarily having to stick to one thing. And I think for me, like I say, it's always been something that I've kind of played around with, but I definitely think for a lot of people, it's really opened, people's minds up to actually working out, actually, if I'm in a job, what's my level of success based on? A lot of people are basing it on what they think they should do and working. Some people absolutely love that, and I absolutely love their way up because they feel like they should. And so a lot of people who actually don't, and have multi kind of passionate, got loads of different ideas of what they'd like to do. And I think it's been a good time to explore whether these passions are actually viable to turn into a business or not. And I think, for me, I've always cared a lot about well-being and kind of that kind of side, which is why I do my more the well-being focused and mental health focused work, because it's always been something I've cared about. But again, it's trying to work out how you can turn that passion into something that you can actually, make money from, really.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think it's more like what you really love and how you can actually, if the place around you make you in the position to do what you love, it doesn't mean that you necessarily need to step and create your own business. But if is that what you want, it's definitely something that you have to do instead of like convince yourself that where you are at the moment is the right place. So my next question is obviously is going more into the, let's say the most practical part of this conversation. So even the most motivated women entrepreneurs can struggle with deciding on the right business idea. For some entrepreneurs, idea flow freely but never get off the ground. For others, ideas are vague and sketchy, so are discarding and never fully explored. So the common question for someone, and actually for everyone, will be, where do I start? So if I have to ask you a question, like for example, I also start with my own business in 2020. So, and probably some of the people in the online tonight, they asking to themselves, but where do I start? What's the first step? So what do you suggest, Lauren? Where did you start, or where someone should start?
I believe that one of the greatest starting points for any kind of venture is in writing or speaking about it, is in creating content, thoughtful content about it. Because regardless what business idea it is you have or whatever's fermenting in the back of your head, you're going to need to be able to enunciate it to someone in order to get them to buy your product or sign you on for your service or get you the funding or whatever it is. But that process of figuring out what your idea is, how you would explain it to someone, geeking out in a blog post, telling people why you're excited about that, all of that can be stuff that you share with other people and can be a source of experimentation and validation for your idea. And that is very much how I started off my business, which, on one hand is a bit easy because I'm all about creating talks and communicating, but that is also how I helped one of my colleagues create his own business, which is a nuclear energy advocacy group.
Wow.
He said, how do I want to talk about this. I said, okay, well, there is this event happening in our hometown. They're looking for speakers. Do you think you could give a 20-minute talk on why this energy form isn't the devil? He goes, absolutely, I could. Cool, go for it. And that was how he started. And over and over and over again, I've seen people, whether they want to, as you were saying, Eleanor, get higher up in the company they're in, which is awesome, or make something new and try something out. When they get their ideas out on the head, put it on paper, put it on video, and share it with people. That's where you start being recognized as someone who does this thing. And that's the germ of a business.
Yeah. Ellie, you were saying, you were nodding like this is so absolutely right.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I think people really kind of underestimate the importance of the relationships that you build and how you actually communicate your value. And I think for me, I know that pretty much well, not every, but most business opportunities I've had, whether it's even, in a kind of working situation, in my own job, or actually kind of with my business, it's always been often by like how I've communicated it and who I'm speaking to and the relationships that you build. And I know a lot of people get quite, nervous around the idea of, networking. And actually, I think it's about looking at it from a point of view. It's not necessarily you having to, build fake relationships. It's actually you building meaningful relationships and being able to communicate the value that you can bring. Because if you can't communicate the value, then how do you expect anyone to then see the value for themselves? And I think, like you say, I think communication and relationship building are two of the most important things with any idea. And I think also the more work you do even on yourself with regards to why you're doing it. So, the more you're self-aware about the actual reason behind your business, like the purpose of it, what you want to get out of it, again, the easier it is to actually learn how to actually communicate that value and to keep going even when times are difficult with your business.
We're gonna get to that when when everything is getting more difficult. So if I have to ask you, where do I start? And I have this idea, I want to start my business. So how is that different from what Lauren and Ellie said till now? Or
I think I would just add another. I think each of us have had little golden nuggets, and I would just add into. And I think the first question you have to ask yourself is, what problem are you solving for? What's the gap? What's the problem you're solving for? That, I mean, it's so basic to that piece and to that level. Like for me, and I found it almost like in a frustrating manner, right? In the sense of, I knew that I loved coaching. I had been coaching women and individuals for years, whether it be in debate when I was doing debate coaching for school age children and things like that. And I realized that what is really frustrating me is how much money women were leaving on the table as it relates to negotiating. I knew that that was a problem that I felt passionate about solving. And I started from there. I started from understanding what's the problem that I had to solve. What was it that I felt really compelled? Because here's the thing, when you start a business and you start wanting to do something, you definitely want to make sure that what is that, first of all, what's that number that's going to get you out of bed in the morning? Because this is not like the every other week you're getting a paycheck. You're making sure that something is propelling you to want to do this. So for me, it was a matter of like, what's the problem I feel passionate about solving? But I will add to what Eleanor was saying and Ellie was saying was about the relationships, is because what I'd add to that is start with your lowest hanging fruit in the sense of the relationships that you have. And don't be shy about asking people for help and helping you navigate these relationships. So for example, if you know the problem you want to solve and you kind of have a network of people, a lot of times people want to go above and beyond outside of their network because they don't want to bother somebody to ask them the question, or they don't want to feel that they were, like they want to honor the relationship. So I'll give you the perfect example. I remember wanting to be a faculty. I was working raising money. That was what my role was at a university. And I wanted to become a faculty member. I had my master's degree. And instead of just asking the people inside of my university, I decided to go outside of my university to apply for other jobs. And to me, that was like much more work than just to know and ask the people who already knew me. And so my biggest thing is, don't go if you envision an apple tree, don't go to the highest level to get that apple. Just reach up your hand and pull it down. Your lowest hanging fruit, your relationships, is where you start, and you really begin to have some informational interviews to figure it out. So, you explore ideas, you test ideas out there, and you say, I'm really looking to solve X problem, and I'm looking to do it this way. What do you think about that? And have some of these informational meetings with your peers of influence. And so I do think that the relationships are incredibly important, but that first question has to be, what are you solving for?
Absolutely. And actually, once you find out what your business is going to do in terms of what's the problem that your business is solving, then how do you think, I think you already answered this question in a way, Janine, but how do you think you can find then your niche market? Because, once you are able to solve a problem, is not that problem obviously is not for everyone. So, and also it's quite important to find your niche. So how do you think, and how did you find your niche, Lauren?
I experimented with a lot of different niches. It's like, okay, when I first hung out my shingle, it was anyone and everyone. Do you want me to speak for you? Cool, I will speak for you. Do you want me to help you do it? Cool, I will do it. And so by surveying lots of different audiences, niches, markets, I was able to get a feel for which of those markets seemed to grab on with the most urgency and with the most desire. Something that I learned is that my approach and the way that I view communication and the way that I teach it works extremely well for what I call high intensity, high competition industries. Finance, engineering, medicine, academics, to a degree politics, but I get tired of mucking around in that arena. So those groups, I think that it's kind of the competitive and urgent nature behind them made them say, yes, I want to employ these strategies. Absolutely, I see where you're going with this. I discovered I'm not so great working with teenagers.
Oh, really?
I like teenagers. They're a lot of fun, but it was the wrong approach for that group. Similarly, I don't tend to work a whole lot with teachers because they have a very different need for their approach than I do.
Yeah.
I rarely work with lawyers because they have their own approach that they like very much and they stick there. But I figured this out by being willing to work with all of them and seeing how it went.
Yeah.
And from there, it was where am I having the greatest impact? Okay, these industries and this level within these industries. That's where I'll focus all my efforts. But I wouldn't have gotten there if I hadn't tried out all the other stuff.
Yeah, because sometimes there is a tendency. I can see that I did a mistake too, and probably I'm still doing it. I'm considering myself an entrepreneur in progress. Of the tendency of okay, so I love to talk about that, and I'm gonna talk just to that type of people, to that niche audience. And sometimes it's difficult because it's not necessarily they like your message or they like your product. So I think that it's something what do you think about finding your niche and how you do that in your job, Ellie? If you can give some advice, because obviously as a head of events, you work with a specific audience all the time.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think it really depends. I think obviously in my role, I definitely have noticed that, of course, the hotel I'm obviously working in, obviously, attracts certain kinds of people as well. So, you very much, there's people who like the brand are going to come to their hotel over people, obviously, who want something different and more traditional. So there's definitely a sense there. But I think even the reason why I started doing my relationship coaching was because when I was looking for more of a coaching niche, I realized I was trying to go out, trying to do more of the kind of, I had to do some career coaching, but originally I was trying to do the well-being coaching and things. And I kept realizing that I think because being a wedding planner specifically as well, before being an event planner, I noticed that I spend a lot of time with couples, obviously helping them prepare, that actually relationship coaching almost came easier to me. And I'd have people asking me questions about that. So I kept trying with this niche thinking, no, but I want to be doing just well-being focused solely. And then everyone was like, oh no, but you're actually better at this. And I think because I was so used to working with couples in my actual role already, it meant that I just I lent myself more naturally to a different niche. And again, I think to begin with, I was resisting a bit. And I think it's the more you understand that, for me, I really wanted to kind of use my relationship coaching, but in more of a corporate environment. So I was like, okay, but I can do it more and work more with founders, for example. A relationship doesn't have to be a couple. It can be, people who are founders of a company. It can be anyone. But I just think it's often looking at how other experiences you've had can really help create your niche for you. So if you look at your career and what you've been doing and the things you're really good at, the things you really enjoy, the things that come naturally to you, you can definitely then find out where there's a niche within that that you're more easily suited to, rather than trying to find the person that you think wants the thing that you're going to solve their problem. You kind of get this idea of this kind of person. It doesn't always work like that. So yeah, I think it's more about working out what you are naturally good at.
So do you think that testing the product with an audience is the right things to do, Yoni?
Yeah, absolutely. I do think test and tweak as much as possible. I will tell you, right when I started, I had an idea of who I wanted to market to. Originally, it was millennial women. That's who I wanted to market to. I wanted to market to millennial women. I thought they were, on the rise, all these kind of things. And who I was seeing that was coming out to the majority of my events were women in career transition, is where I saw a little bit more of the opportunity. So you have this intention and you put it out there, but then you see, and you have to kind of listen to the market. And I was looking at it and I was like, oh, I wonder how come I don't have enough. Why aren't millennial women like really, attracted to these kind of things? And what I was seeing is that the majority of the women that were coming were anywhere between, pushing 40 up to 50. And so I was like, okay, so these, and then I started discovering that it was women in career transition that I noticed were coming a lot more to my negotiating workshops and that sort of thing. And, my whole thing too is at the beginning, have some compassion for yourself, because you're not going to just figure out your niche market off the gate. You're just not. Let's just take that very perfectionist point of view and just throw it out the window, because you're not going to find your niche market. What you'll definitely do, and this is something that I did immediately, was I am so grateful for the first clients I ever had, but I also realized they were definitely not my right clients, my right fits. People, I'm grateful for them, but into it, I was like, I can't do this anymore. These are definitely not who I want to serve. And that's a blessing too, knowing and really defining and getting that segmentation correctly. And I think the first thing to do somewhere, not overthinking it too much, but getting started is really where you're going to really start seeing results. And the more you do it, as Lauren said, right, the more you put yourself out there, whether it's a speaking event you want to become an expert in, the more you'll see who's right, who do I align more with my values, what's the clientele that I want to serve. That's how I would recommend that flow going first.
Yeah, because sometimes, we have this idea, mainly because for some of us coming from, I don't know, media studies kind of background or economics kind of background, or just because we have been working in corporation for such a long time. So as a marketer, okay, let's put together the strategy, following the values of my company and follow the description of my audience based on a data analysis. So guys, when you start your own business, you don't know you don't know your audience.
You don't have data. That's the thing. There's no data to go by. And I'll tell you, as listen, I teach in a master's program and in a master's of marketing program, and my students come and they're like, well, I don't have enough data to make these decisions yet. And I say, well, you're never going to have enough data to make all the decisions. You kind of go with what you got. And my biggest thing, and I think that as entrepreneurs, there's a balance of the amount of planning that it takes to run a successful business. But the biggest mindset issue that I find over and over again is overthinking, completely overthinking a process, and it's almost like analysis by paralysis, or paralysis by analysis. Yeah. So that's what I would say.
Yeah. And it's absolutely true, because then sometimes you spend so much time in putting together the perfect business plan before actually starting to put that plan into action. And talking about that, like sometimes we think about what's the best way in like also create like a brand and position that brand in the market, or brand or personal brand, depends. So on that level, what do you suggest? Obviously it's different, like we said, starting from scratch. So what it will be the first steps in order to create your brand or your personal brand, in case, for example, you're selling services that are related to your personal branding. So what do you say? What do you think about that, Lauren?
I think that it actually relates back to something that Yanyan said earlier, which was know what problem you're solving, but also know who you're solving it for. And a mindset that I take when I'm helping people figure out their speaking and presentation style, kind of who they are when they get up in front of a crowd, is to say, okay, first up, who do you see yourself being? Kind of idealize that. Ideally, in your role, in your situation, who do you see yourself as being? But then, and this is really critical, put on your audience's glasses and look at yourself from their point of view. Specifically ask, who does my audience need me to be in order for them to solve their problem? And the brand is kind of found in the middle of that. When you can actually get those two things married together. Who am I ideally to myself? That's your authenticity, that's your integrity. And who does my audience need me to be in order for their problem to be solved? That's that responsiveness to their genuine needs. And you can build a lot off of that. You can identify style, you can identify look, you can identify what sort of problems it is you're going to focus on. And that really does help you cinch down that identity.
Do you think that, for example, Yanin, is like similar to create a brand for a small business or a personal brand? Do you think is a difference in that? Because
that's funny. It's one of the old age questions on, do I separate my personal and my professional life? I feel like that's one of the things that I continue to run into. And I think that they're one and the same. As a founder of a business, you are, your values are going to come out in what your business values will be. It's very much going to be synonymous with those pieces. I did my own opinion about it. I don't subscribe in having two personal different brands, because I just don't think that a person can split themselves into two. You'll see it bleeding in, and you'll see when there's conflict. If you're personal and you're professional, or if you're in your business and in your personal life, it's not consistent, the users will see it. The users will see it, because they're going to try to find right now a lot of the customer base, when you're looking at social media, when you're looking at trying to get some kind of brand identity, people are looking for the why and the who and the behind it, right? Yeah. And they want to see if there's consistency there. So I do think that personal brand, with the owner of that and founder of the brand, is going to, bleed in and have a lot of say within the company brand that you build.
That is so true. And actually, this is a question as well for you, Ellie, in a way that, when you are work for a corporation, you have a tendency to, in a way, sign up to the value of that brand, but then at the same time you have your own personal brand. So what do you will suggest to someone that is in that process of moving and separate the be Rossella at this company to Rossella is doing her own business and Rossella is becoming herself like a personal brand?
I think a lot of it as well comes down to, like you said, kind of amalgamating the two. So, looking at, maybe if you're working for a company now, looking at the values that you really like within that company and the values that you think that you're really attracted to. Often, there's a reason why, if you're in a company that you really love, often it's because as well, you really identify with the values of the company. But also you have people who are in a company who don't necessarily identify with the values and are quite keen to be getting out. And I think it's always good to look at exactly what it is and what do you want to take, because I think along all of our career journey, we learn things from different clients or different places that we work, and I think it's about taking which bits you find would be most applicable to you and your own personal brand, and then using that to develop and keep honing it, really. And I think bringing in bits, I mean, for me, for example, I knew that I've always really worked within luxury events and luxury weddings. And then I thought, okay, but I really enjoy more of the well-being side. So it's okay, so I'm trying to use, the things that I care about, but also with parts of the brand and things that I really love and that I really like, and trying to think of a new way around that. So for me, I thought, okay, so I really care about the idea of wellness and well-being, and I also really care about the luxury side and events. So it's really looking at how I can then create events that bring people together and that maybe are more well-being focused, or offering more of a personalized service with my clients because of course, when you have relationship coaching, you're looking at how you speak to people and making sure that you know how to really react to what they're doing and actually really ask the right questions and make sure that you really show you can care. And I think if that's how I try and kind of amalgamate my two kind of passions, I suppose, into one. And I think it's about bringing everything together.
Yeah, definitely. And it is like that happened to me as well. Like I took some of the value of one of the companies I've been working for a long time. They were pretty much close to who I am, and then change that with my passion and mix that with my passion until then you create your own brand. So let's say that I start my brand. I have my little fan base that is made by followers or people that subscribe to my newsletter on my website or people that are following me on LinkedIn. How do I start to actually sell my product to these people? Let's say that is a product or is a service. So where do I start? Because now I have my little audience. Let's say that I have my little pot of data. How can I sell my product now? Janine, do you want to start? I'm starting with you this time.
Sure, I'm happy to start. So I think for the launch, I think you almost have like a timeline. For my recommendations, always timeline for like a soft launch, and then you tweak any of the things in the data that you get, and then you do a more formal hard launch, right? And so when you have a little pocket of data, as you mentioned, you have some subscribers, some people who are tuning in, whatever the product or service that you're selling. So saying, where I'm more in the service industry with workshops and seminars and such. So my biggest thing was when I launched with a topic, right, of choice. I decided that I was going to define myself on the negotiation side. So I launched with a topic. I invited a very, intimate group of individuals to the workshop. I tested it out where it was, as if you were to test out soft launching a restaurant, right? They do, testing and tweaking to making sure. So I did a seminar. I invited, a group of 30 individuals. We hosted the seminar. I conducted surveys after. I tested it, I then tweaked it, and then I did a hard launch. Similar to products as well. I would always, get a test group of individuals. I would budget in for that before you completely launch into a product with a group of trusted individuals that are going to give you the right facts and the right, sometimes things that are hard to hear, right, that you need to fix. And then I would proceed to launch, but I would always recommend to do some kind of soft launch where you can test this out with a trusted group of individuals that can actually come in and buy in your product, and then you tweak it for the future for a hard launch.
It was the same for you, Lauren? How did you start to sell your product to your original fan base or followers of your audience, the first audience?
I had been cultivating my audience for quite a while, for close to a year before I really started selling my individual products outside of my speaking services. And when I first started saying, okay, I want to be a paid speaker and I want to do this, my first step was to ask people who knew me and people who knew I was good at what I did to refer me. I flat out asked for referrals. I asked for referrals from friends, family, as well as my fan base. Said, I'm doing this thing now. Do you have this need? Come talk to me. Very, very, like Janine said, very soft, but honing in on those relationships, on that trust that I already developed with people that my stuff was good. Yeah. From there, I would go to the place who had the anxieties that I spoke to, that I helped them solve. I would go to where I knew they were hanging out and then tell them about what I had coming. So quite literally, my first, I would say, launch campaign was for a group class that I still run to this day, although not in person right now, needless to say. But my in-person group program, I went to large corporate offices in the downtown core with those papers that have the slits cut on them where you can pull the phone number or the website.
Oh, wow.
And I for about a week, every lunch hour, I walked around and I posted them on every single bulletin board I could find. And I filled the class. first time out, like, cool. So, there's an aspect of knowing where your people are hanging out and going directly to them and saying, I made this, to steal how Seth Godin puts it. Here, I made this. It might be for you. And then you'll find out if it is for them or not. From then, you have a little bit of data to go off of, like Yen said, so you can say, okay, well, if it didn't go well, or if it did go well, you can say, was it a match or mismatch in terms of audience? Was it a match or a mismatch in terms of topic, in terms of delivery? You can figure out what worked and what didn't, iterate that from the next time around, and then say, okay, hi, everyone, I'm back. I have this next thing, and it's a little bit better and a little bit more expensive.
Exactly. Yeah.
Or I have this thing and it's super cheap because I just want to try it out. Maybe it's for you. But it always starts off with that trust-based relationship first.
And I think the trust is built on quality.
Yeah.
And we go back to what we said before, that trust is also built on who you really are. So people can now tell the difference if you are doing something because you want to create a business out of it, or if you are doing that because it's your passion. And you can tell the difference between someone that is doing with passion and someone that is just doing because it's a service I want to sell. So I think once you gain that trust, you gain the trust, and behind that trust there is quality, and because there is passion, I believe. So for those who have started their business already, how can they increase their brand awareness, communicate the right message to their customer, and eventually convert leads? This is a more kind of a question that I would like to start with you, Ellie. So let's say that, okay, now my business, I'm already 2 years into my business. I'm able to understand who I'm talking to. I'm able to understand, to communicate the right message. But how can I increase the brand awareness to my customer and actually convert those leads, basically?
Yeah, I think one thing that I think I always actually found quite difficult to begin with, and that I think a lot of people do, is the idea of when you're selling something, it suddenly feels like, oh, you're having to almost change these followers into people who want to buy from you, and that you're having to sell to them as though it's something that you shouldn't want to do, or there's an issue with it. And I think it's really about reframing it and making sure that when you're selling something, you're also giving someone some value. So as long as you can communicate the value then that you're bringing, you can then obviously, and make sure that you're consistent with your brand. So of course, with branding, of course, you have different kind of pillars and different parts to your brand. And I think it's about being really consistent, obviously with your branding. And also, I think, like Yoni mentioned earlier as well, people care about the face behind the brand. People want to know your story. And I've always really believed in being really kind of honest as well, about different things. You have to just be honest and make sure that you're speaking to people in a way that they also, feel like they're getting to know you. And then as you're kind of converting, I think it's really about, like, once you've built the relationship, you've built the trust. If someone knows you and someone feels like they trust you and they want to, obviously, they like your service, it's then about how you actually, not only communicate it, but how you kind of treat the sale. And rather than it being something where you're presuming, I know, again, another thing actually is about the idea that you often in sales, you sometimes presume that someone knows. So I remember having a wedding inquiry and a couple came to me, and I remember, because everyone else always wanted the same kind of venue to use the ballroom for their event, I kind of just took them down there thinking, oh yeah, this is what we do. And suddenly I realized, after talking to them for a few minutes, that actually, hold on a second, they wanted something different. They didn't want the thing that everyone else does. They wanted actually to do it in a completely different space that was completely, no one had ever done before. And I hadn't really asked those questions. And I just kind of had presumed. And I think, again, when it comes to sales, it's about it's not presuming that that they want that item, but actually making sure you're asking the right questions. And again, you're staying consistent with your brand to really, to be able to actually convert that.
Yeah, I'm seeing you agree with that, Janine. Would you want to, because we had this conversation previously about negotiation and how actually sell your product. Yeah.
I completely agree with what ends up happening for a lot of sales professionals or anybody when you're trying to sell something is that you want to steamroll through your pitch, and you want to say, and we have this and this and this, and it's like this buffet of options. And sometimes, a lot of times, people, they're missing out verbal or even not of not seeing that they're not really in alignment with what you're saying. And then you have to kind of, take a step back and ask, it sounds like, or it seems like that, what I'm saying is not aligning with what you might want. Is that correct? And they're like, yeah, well, actually, this is where I want to take this. And asking those questions and not just having, I completely detest, the standard elevator pitch, and you just completely immediately out of the gate coming out with your pitch and not even taking time to ask questions or be curious. And I think that that's the biggest thing, that you definitely want to establish that connection with the people that you're serving, but also anticipate. And this is the biggest thing, because so many businesses had a thought of what 2020 was going to look like. I mean, I know I did. I came into my business 2020 and I'm like, this is going to be the best year ever. Look at all this abundance. I mean, I was just completely, and then all of a sudden, here we go. And I started seeing things happen. And then I realized, and this is where it's so it's such a pinnacle part for you to be able to pivot, but you have to be able to understand immediately when something like this of such grandeur happens. Like here in the States, we have hurricanes, and specifically here in South Florida in the United States, there's hurricane season that happens all the time. You have to anticipate needs. And I think that what ends up happening is sometimes your target demographic or their needs change, right? So do you think that anybody wanted to negotiate, their salaries at the time? They just wanted to hold their positions. But how do you establish? So now my framing wasn't like we're negotiating for a salary. Now my framing was, how do you establish leverage in the organization that you have, right? I mean, there's ways that you have to pivot the conversation and anticipate your audience's needs. And your audience, sometimes you can be tone deaf. And if in the sense that if you're not addressing the needs that are out there, then you might be seen as out of touch. And I say this because I do think there's a necessity with how right now what we're experiencing, let's say like in the diversity space and a number of organizations, almost the market is compelling them to take a stance on how they're going to change this, right? Yeah. And if they don't, then people can see it. When you're silent, people can see it. So I say this because I think the golden nugget to take out of here is always to anticipate what your customer might want, but really address them where they're at, and making sure that you're not just going through a pitch, but you are always asking and almost validating the conversation as you have it with them.
Yeah, I think what you said about diversity is so true, because lately, and I'm talking about now 4 or 5 years, even more, it becomes like some sort of trend topic to talk about. And a lot of companies are like really happy to throw those 2 words as much as they can. But then like actually see the difference is really hard. And we look at the stats and you can still see that there is a massive gap. The gender pay gap is still there. The number of women in creativity at the top are still 11% worldwide. If we're talking on finance, again, like we have 5% of CEO. If we're talking at the startup world and tech companies, 90% of founding are still going to men. So is a lot of talking and really little action. So as well, it's quite important to, especially when you are talking about topic like that, to be consistent and to be real. Otherwise, it's just a waste of time for everyone. So talking about what we were saying before, and how you can gain, like how to do the next step. What do you think about that, Lauren? What's like the best way to do that? So let's say that you already, like this, the question that I asked to Ali and to Yanin. So you want to convert those leads and also like reach new markets that are different from what you have at the moment. So what will be next step?
You cannot be shy first up in asking for the business. You need to say, can I have that referral? Do you know someone else? I would like to present this to you. You can't be shy and hold back and hope that they will call on you. So that won't necessarily happen. You need to really get out there and put yourself out there. And you need to be able, when you are putting yourself out there, you need to be able to demonstrate confidence and certainty in what it is that you're offering. That doesn't mean that you are showing arrogance and inflexibility, far from it, because someone who is confident and certain in what they are, who they are, what they offer, has the confidence to be flexible. They don't say, oh no, my identity is now being threatened because this person pushed back and said that what I'm pitching doesn't exactly fit their need. They don't get threatened by that. They'll say, okay, well, what do you need? Let's see if we can flex with this. And that demonstrates that you have a lot of certainty in what it is you're offering them. It helps other people develop confidence in you. And understanding how to send those signals is really important. You know, this is something that I consistently work on with many of the female senior leaders that I actually do quite a bit of my coaching with, is how to telegraph that without overselling it, without seeming phony. Because heavens knows, especially when you're dealing with situations like breaking into industries or into companies that are very, very male heavy, if you go the inauthentic route and try to pander to what they expect or what the overall culture expects, they'll pick up on that phoniness, right? And it doesn't feel good. It is harder to be confident. You're like, I'm a complete fake. By the same token, understand what those signals are that they're picking up on and that they're reading. Is my tone of voice confident? Is my posture good? Am I showing them that I believe in what it is I'm doing? And then you move forward and you ask for it.
Great. Yeah.
Easier said than done.
Yeah, I know. But
It's nerve-wracking.
I know. And actually, like, I think two things that came out a lot from the conversation that I had with people before this webinar, because we also did a survey, is that the importance of resilience and maintain your mindset. So literally like that link to wellness and mental health. So what's your suggestion, for example, Ellie, on that? Because, you know, you start a business, you are an entrepreneur, you are after like down the line, or even if you are in a transaction between one position to another, you go through some really tough moments. And sometimes you're also ready to give up. Can happen that you think, oh, like, okay, so this is 2 years that I'm working on this project. It doesn't really go anywhere. So how you can maintain that resilience and maintain also a little bit of sun, like your mental health, truly.
Yeah, no, of course. This is something that that I really care a lot about. I think really, obviously, I think if COVID has taught us anything, really, it's that we really can't always predict, obstacles. You can plan, and there's a lot of planning, of course, when it comes to a business, but you can't always plan for these obstacles. And all you can really do is ensure that you've kind of got the emotional capacity to be able to handle the changes and the obstacles that you are undoubtedly going to face at some point. And I just think it's actually funny how, like we say, obviously we exercise our bodies, we should be exercising our minds just as much. And I think it's really important for people to also try and be, working on their mindset and really learning. I think the more you learn about yourself and the more you learn about the emotions and how you kind of react to different situations, if you notice them and you can pinpoint them, it's so much easier then to work out how to actually change it. And I know, whether it's overthinking, which I know Yoni mentioned before as well, which is a massive one, which I think I've always, struggled with previously. But yeah, whether it's with lack of motivation, procrastination, perfectionism, and just having the self-doubt and not knowing how to overcome that, I think a lot of them really start who you are, what with your mindset, and actually knowing and how to actually, there's apps, there's so many resources out there now to actually help you. But to look at the more self-aware you are, the more maybe where you need help in certain areas, or then how to, if you're someone who overthinks, looking at those thoughts and working out, okay, which thoughts are really helping me and actually serving me and helping me to like maybe protect me on this journey, and which ones are actually just completely hindering my progression. And I think the more you can almost label it and name it, the easier it is to actually change that. And yeah, I think resilience is probably the biggest thing, really, because there's going to be times when you're going to doubt why you started. And I think the clearer you are on why you have, then the easier it is to just keep going through that.
It's so tough. But thank you, Dali. I think it was a question coming from me more than anyone else.
I mean,
A question from Marianne. Marianne, if you want, you can ask the question directly to the panel. I think you can, otherwise I can ask that question for you. So Marianne is asking, I'm starting my business at the same time as still having a director role in a multinational company. My business is in a different industry. I have worked for 9 years in my current company. Most of my network is in the beauty industry, whilst what I want to do is in a jewelry industry. Any tips to build new relationships when I'm still employed full time and haven't told my employer that I'm doing this trial on the side? Yanin, do you want to take this?
Sure. Yeah, I was actually replying to her. I had seen the note, and I'm happy to just kind of start it off. But my first suggestion is, I mean, there's a number of networking sites, LinkedIn and things like that you can go through. But I would begin with your own personal network and seeing if and really seeing if your personal network has any connections to the jewelry industry first, to see if there may be a warm introduction. That would be my first suggestion. But the second suggestion is, where do these jewelry industry experts hang out? What events are they attending online? Are there anything that you can get connected to be exposed to these individuals? I know there are a lot of industry type, I mean, even sometimes in the luxury brand industry, there are associations where some of these individuals get together. Find out what any of those associations might be, and maybe it's just attending some of those events to start, coming outside of your network. So my first thing would be, inside your network, see if there's any can be a person, and that can be as figuring out within your LinkedIn, if you have a LinkedIn profile, what people are. The second piece is to take a look at some industry association events as it relates to the jewelry industry and maybe luxury brand industry that you might want to attend online, and start getting connected there.
I think also one more question that she's asking, that Marianne asking, is also is more how to handle morally the duality, as I haven't told my employer, and just that I feel super guilty. It's actually something that resonate with me, happened to me as well in the past. So how you will manage that, Lauren?
I really feel you, Marianne. I was working in libraries for close to 7 years while I was building my business at the same time and doing a lot of work in both. The first question would be, is your work within the jewelry industry materially affecting your ability to do your job? Can you type that into chat? Yes or no?
No.
Then where's the problem? No. If you are still fulfilling your obligation in your current role, you are still doing good work, you're still showing up for them, you're allowed to have another side to yourself. Which, yes, it might be an industry that you plan on jumping to in the future, but as long as that wish to jump to it isn't detracting from the work that you're currently doing, you're fulfilling your moral obligation, absolutely. What's more, if your employer if it's a concern about coming to your employer and they're saying, oh, well, you can't focus on your job. If you've already been doing it for quite a while, that could be a way that you introduce it. You just, oh, you know what? I wrote this thing that got printed in this jewelry industry magazine. And it's kind of like it's de facto, it's done. It's already happening. And clearly you're still doing a good job in your other things. So you introduce the notion that you have this other side to you slowly and gently to people. It's simply part of who you are. I kid you not, for years I used to moonlight as a professional belly dancer. And guess what? No one in any industry I worked in ever actually cared that I did that because it had no bearing on anything. So I was able to have those two sides. Now, at some point, as you make the transition, the work that you're doing in the jewelry industry, that's going to get to be too much to juggle with your current job. And that's when you have to sit down and say, okay, where is the line where I make that switch? That was a call that I had to make before I finally jumped ship from my previous industry as well and go full time into this. But, I towed that line for a while. At what point are my activities here big enough to support me, but also big enough that they're impacting my ability to do good work here? And then I think that the moral call on your part will be clear. But don't put yourself in a moral conundrum that doesn't actually exist. If you're still doing good by your old job, keep going.
Yeah. And it's actually so true what you're saying, Lauren, because happened to me. And at some point when you were saying like that your side project can bring something to your daily activity. And I realized that, for example, I was working for a big event company. And at some point I was helping actually out the content producer on finding the right speaker for certain panels, because like they wanted to focus more on diversity and inclusion, and the business was focused on e-commerce. So they didn't have that, mindset to find women that are working in e-commerce and they can actually talk about that topic. And I had that knowledge. So actually my project on the side helped my daily business. So until you decide, okay, this is what I really want to do. So thank you very much. I love you all. Goodbye.
If I may, that's actually a really good point, that what you are doing with the jewelry stuff could actually benefit your work in the beauty as well, because they strike me as being ancillary industries.
Yeah, exactly.
So you may connect there. That could really benefit the other too. And you might be surprised that when people do find out that you're doing this thing, they're not going. Most of my experience with a lot of other people who have made these kinds of transitions has also been that people weren't, oh, well, clearly you don't have enough time to do this. Their response is usually, that's really cool that you also are doing this other thing. And they could benefit each other, these two things that you're doing.
Absolutely. And sometimes if you do something on a side, that can actually make you to stand out from the crowd, even if you have to get a promotion, because you look like you are really passionate and you have a big passion on the side. So that can actually help you also to grow inside your business. So I can see like we're probably going to have some more questions. So in the meantime, while people are actually writing their questions, I want to share with you guys a list of, because obviously one thing that is also quite important is how to find funding, because some of the business can be self-found, which means, okay, I create my product, I create my service, I have my beautiful brand, I have my fan base, here we are, I'm going to sell my product. And in that case, you are selling also kind of product that are funding, but that you want to create an app, or you probably want to create a platform. So there are so many different ways on find funding. I have listed like different kind of way to find it and all the platform where you can find this information. And I will add that here. So like we said at the beginning, we can start with our family and friends is actually a really good way to initially start to find funding. You can also use crowdfunding platform. There are so many. I list them here: Indiegogo, Seed Invest, Technology, Mighty Cause, Start Engine, GoFundMe, Patreon. There are so many. Also, like if you are on a different stage, so you already build your product and you're actually looking for founders, talking about female-led startups, you also have the opportunity to actually get in touch with business angels and founders. Here as well, I list so many. There are so many in the UK of founders that can actually help female-led business. So you have 500 Women, Astia, BBG, Chloe Capital, Global Investor. You can find information. I will share this information with you after the webinar in an email with like all the information and the link to this platform. And it's quite useful in order also to have advices, because I personally got in touch with some of the business angels to put together your business plan or putting together the case in order to find the right funding. And like I said, support for female founders. I list some other website there. And yes, I will share all this information. I think it's quite useful also to understand where you can actually find the money to build your business, because especially at the beginning it can be really hard to pay yourself. So founding an angel, so founding a fund, someone that can actually give a fund, financially support the business, can also help you to pay your monthly salary, because you also need to think in that way. So Mari is asking another question. Could we talk more about how to start a project parallel to your 9-to-5 work, as it feels that working on a project on the side will not have as much attention due to the time you have available for that? So Janine, what do you answer? Do you want to answer that question? So what's the way to start a project that is parallel to your 9-to-5 work? And
so just to clarify the question, Marie, is it that the project, are you trying to start it at the same time as you doing the 9-to-5, or are you trying to start it where the side project is similar to your 9-to-5? I'm just curious in that clarification.
I can probably make her moderate.
Completely separate. Okay, so it's just basically how do you start it? How do you get on a system and kind of go? So to me, I'm happy to clarify this afterwards as well, is you're gonna have to bundle in some of the time, when where it is that you want to best, allocate your time to spend on building a side project or what have you. I will tell you, and I'm an early riser in the sense that I wake up at 4:30 in the morning. I mean, that's usually what I do. I wake up at 4:30 in the morning. I am working out, pretty close to that. And then I do my own things. I'll meditate, I'll read, and then I get started. By 6 o'clock, I'm pretty much, starting on whatever it is. And I remember when I was doing my parallel business, I'd like the quiet hours of the morning, whether you have to see if you're an early morning person or you're a night owl, right? Me too. Yeah. So, this is a particular say, and I will tell you, I am more, when I create, I'm a natural creator. So when I create best in the morning. If you tell me to create right now, which is right now on East Coast time, it's about 2:37 p.m. I know it's evening time over there, but if you ask me to create past 3 p.m., my brain is just going to be fog. So my biggest thing is, what is your best working hours? What are the times that you spend? And can you just allocate 45 to an hour? If it can be a day, if it can be every other day to start, and start with an outline, start getting into a habit of that's your time that you spend with your business with no distractions. And then you build out a little bit more until it makes sense, right? I would not, try to do it before or after work, but it depends on the hours of the day that you best function in. I know I have my night owls that best function very late evenings, and if that's your time, then that consistency will be key. It's just when you find that specific time, be consistent with yourself.
So next question is more focused on social media. I can probably, I don't know if anyone wants to answer, but I can probably take that, because I'm focused. I've been focused for a long time on digital marketing. I can give you some tips on that, Louise. So the question is, any tips on how to get more brand awareness, for example, getting more followers on Instagram? On that I think what you need to understand is, first of all, once you create your own brand, what are your values, how you want to look, and then put together an actual editorial plan. So once you create your editorial plan, you need to have some strategy on what you want to communicate. If it's something that you want to be inspirational, you want to sell your product at the same time. So you need to create some sort of plan of how you want to communicate. But on that, in terms of how to engage and do brand awareness, one thing that, for example, I use a lot for We Hate Pink is create media partnership. So connecting with people that is on your space and other communities that are actually working in the kind of same space you work, and work on the exchange of exposure. it works quite well, especially on Instagram. Is an easy way to enlarge the number of followers. And then obviously something that I always say is like, you need to create some interesting content, which is the way that people start to follow you more. If you want more information about that, and if you need any more tips on how to engage and get more followers, there is one a platform that is called Domestika. I will write it down here, where you can find some amazing courses specifically on how to grow your business, your followers for a business. So you can find that they're super easy courses, they're super easy to find, and they actually help you out because they give you tips and like step-by-step practice on how to engage with your followers and how to enlarge your following. So I think we get over an hour. So if we don't have any more questions, I will say, first of all, thank you very much to Ellie, Lauren, Yoni. You've been amazing during the preparation, during all this time, to dedicate your time to this project. And before we're closing, I'd like you to share which project you have in plan, which project you are planning, if you have any books coming out, and first of all, where everyone can follow you. So if you want to share your handles, your website, everything. So let's start it with you, Ellie. So what you have, what are your next projects, and where they can find you?
Yeah, of course. So I'll type it in the box as well. But yeah, so I've got a small kind of platform community now, which I'm setting up, which is called We Are Rise Network, which I'll type in. And basically, yeah, I really realized that a lot, I think, around, setting up a business is all about the support community and the support network you have around you. So my idea with it really was to help specifically with people who are maybe in full-time roles, kind of unsure of their next step, and really having a support network where, you can share advice, you can skill swap with other people. And of course, it's mainly focused around the idea of the mindset and the relationship building when it comes to creating a business. So yeah, that's what I'm working on at the moment. And then obviously, of course, event planning as well. So yeah, very busy. But yeah, thank you. I'll leave it now.
Thank you, Ellie. Janine, do you want to share if you have anything coming up, your new projects, or if you have any books coming up, and especially where everyone can find you?
Sure. Hi, everyone. Well, if you'd like to continue the following, I'm on IG at The Win Woman. I'll drop it here in the chat. And you can find me on LinkedIn as well. And for those of you who are looking for connectors, I believe you're looking for jewelry connectors. I actually do have a couple of jewelry connectors you can find in my connections. So just send me a link there. As far as books go, I had recently published a book back in October. It was called Building Badassery. It's all about really getting that next step into what you need to take control of your life and your career. So it's a guidebook, it's a workbook, and you can find that on Amazon. I'm happy to put it in the link below. So thank you.
Lauren.
Easiest way to find me is online at laurensergi.com. And if you sign up in the pop-up, you will get my latest Q&A videos. I put out a lot of video content on communication tips and tricks, both for in-person communication as well as online and virtual communication. My main things that I'm up to right now are, as you can imagine, completely related to communicating in virtual platforms. So if you head to laurensergi.com/video conference skills, then you will find my course called Making the Most of Video Conferencing. And I have just finished the first draft manuscript of my upcoming book, This Is Your Brain on Video Conference. And that's going to be released in late spring, early summer, probably right around June. It's just getting sent off to the publisher at the moment. So head over to laurensergi.com, sign up in the pop-up. I'll keep you up to date on what's going on there. And my other main platform is YouTube. If you just search for Lauren Sergi in the YouTube search engine, you will find my channel and all of the goodies that I have there for you.
Great. So thank you very much. I want just to say one thing to Julie. Julie, I can, because she said, not sure if I this too late, how do I ask for referral? How do you talk to new people presenting your service without sounding intrusive or desperate? I can share with you some tips on that. But actually, if you want, you can actually reach out to Lauren, Janine, and Ellie. They're all equipped and expert on that, and they will be happy to answer your questions even after the webinar. So thank you very much, everyone, for your time, and have a lovely day, evening, afternoon. I hope to see you soon again. Thank you very much, and thank you for everyone for attending.
Take care, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you. Take care.
Bye-bye, everyone.
Bye.